Welcome back to Hell to Pay podcast. I'm Elle.
And this is Amr.
And we are Sipperless again this week. His handlers are spiriting him across the veldt in South Africa. We don't even know where he is.
Yeah, at this point he could be anywhere. He could be renditioned to Libya, to Syria, and one of those black sites. Sippo, we are assembling a team to rescue you. We just need to fill out the various quotas, the DEI team, if you will. So we're looking for, various minorities, gender minorities, etc., to rescue you from your overseers.
All right. In the meantime, we'll get going with a nice, easy, uncontroversial, uncontentious topic. Which is how Australian soccer became the place for reenacting the Balkans Wars.
It is funny that Australia was once a penal colony, and it became a place for various criminals of the Balkan persuasion to reenact riots, essentially.
Maybe it's still a penal colony.
Maybe. Many such cases.
Just really uncontentious. Just a quick, tight 5 minutes of 20th century Balkan history.
We promise we will not piss off anyone with this episode. No one will be angry at this.
Yeah, both of our listeners are going to be thrilled with it. So let's just dive in and don't yell at me too much because it's obviously just skipping through the background. So obviously the Balkans, it's not easy to necessarily divide it up, but basically your Serbs, your Montenegrins, and your Macedonians are Orthodox. Your Croats and Slovenes are Catholic, and your Bosnians and Herzegovinans and a lot of the Albanian diaspora as well are Muslim. It can be a bit difficult sometimes when you're going through this stuff. So like Catholics living in Bosnia will be like described as Bosnian Croats, Orthodox described as Bosnian Serbs and whatnot. But yeah, when I'm referring to people, we'll generally just be kind of keeping to their sort of religio-ethnic group, but it won't be too complicated. So before World War I, Balkans were kind of the playthings, I guess, at the end of the empires. So Bosnia was Ottoman, and then it was annexed into Austro-Hungarian Empire. Serbian was in the Ottoman Empire as well, and then became its own kingdom. And Croatia was always fairly signed up to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, largely, because of its Catholic brethren. Gavrilo Princip, who assassinated Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which kicked off World War I, he was a Bosnian Serb who wanted to create a unified Slavic state. And then obviously...
To be clear, this is Franz Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, not the band, the indie band.
not the Scots.
Yeah. Though the Franz Ferdinands being Scots is a funny thing to me. I don't know why it is, but it's just funny.
Yeah, it does sound like one of those names I'd love to hear people say, like a Scottish person say. Like Space Ghettos is like how you say Spice Girls in Scottish.
Yeah. I'm not going to do a Scottish accent because I'm not going to do tartan face, but if any of our Scottish listeners can explain why a Scottish band decided to call itself Franz Ferdinand, please explain.
So back to post World War I, interwar years, the Balkans was largely the Kingdom of Yugoslavia, and of course they were just absolute like world champions at assassinations. Everyone was just bumping everyone else off, and there were all the religious and political tensions, and it was just chaos. So out of this emerged Ante Pavlic, who created the Ustaše, which was a far-right Croatian fascist party in 1932. So they were fiercely nationalists, fiercely Catholic, and, as I mentioned, fiercely fascist.
So that's who the guy is, because I knew him from the anti-communist memorial in Canada. He had a name on one of the bricks, which you're allowed to do, apparently. And I thought,
they put Ante Pavlic on oh, Jesus.
Yeah, the Victims of Communism Memorial had. I was being facetious by saying I didn't know who he is, but the Victims of Communism Memorial had both Ante Pavlic and Stepan Bandera on the bricks and stuff like that.
Oh man, yeah, I knew Bandera, but Pavlic is really,
yeah,
that is particularly on the nose. So yeah, he was already like mates with Mussolini. And then, in time would be mates with some pretty serious other dudes as well. So the Catholic Church was pretty heavily involved in this movement as well, because firstly it felt its influence eroding and even threatened with, just the emergence of left-wing and socialist and communist parties all around Europe at the time. But also they just really fucking hated the Orthodox Church and really wanted to mobilize Croatian Catholics against what they saw as a not necessarily an existential threat, but certainly a fierce rival that they just did not want in their backyard. This really helped sort of provide the ground, I suppose, for the Ustaše to be particularly antagonistic towards Orthodox Serbs. So they called Serbs Croats of the Eastern Faith, and they weren't wild about Muslims either. So they called Bosnians Croats of the Islamic Faith.
Which, of course, we know is wrong because the Croats are just Turks of the Catholic faith. And the Serbs are Turks of the Orthodox faith, and so on and so forth. Because everyone is a Turk, really, if you think about it.
That's right. And obviously, needless to say, in all of this, the Ustaše weren't real fans of the Jews either.
Croats of the Hebrew faith.
So fast forward to World War II, Axis powers invade Yugoslavia in 1941. Ustaše puppet government is formed, led by Ante Pavelic, and they basically were just so extreme. Once the invasion happened, it was just complete gloves off, mask off. The Gestapo report next year for Himmler noted that they butchered Serbs with such bloodlust that they not only went after men of conscript age, which is, sort of militia activity 101, but they really went in for the elderly and women and children. So much so that they'd massacred and tortured to death about 300,000 people within, I think, the first 9 months of operation or something. So just absolute madman stuff. And it got to the point where, at one point the Nazis kind of had to step in and say, hey guys, you've got to tone it down a bit. You're giving Nazism a bad name.
It is funny that for all the rightful anger directed at the German Nazis, how insane the Eastern European collaborator factions were. I remember hearing the same thing about the Romanians and the Hungarians as well. The Nazis were guys, please stop, you're making us look bad, please just stop, don't do this, make it. The Germans do love orderly massacres. They don't like disordered massacres. They love rules,
Yeah, well, I mean, in the last episode when you described the Stasi as being data entry wizards, the Germans just love order. The stereotype is true.
Yeah, it is. It's the Stasi being told by Himmler himself to be you guys are making us look bad. Please stop. It's just so insane. And Canada saw that and was yes, please, we would like them as immigrants. Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, so did a little country a bit further afield known as Australia. So obviously after German occupation ended at the end of World War II, Yugoslavia was created. There was, a bit of civil war, yada, yada, yada. Yugoslavia is created. So it's the, federation of the republics, of the different nationalities and religious ethno groups that we talked about earlier, under Tito's relatively relaxed communist regime. And needless to say, around this time, a lot of Nazi collaborators and just straight up Nazis themselves were fleeing Europe. And a lot of those of the Ustaše persuasion were first out the door as well.
So it's not wrong to say that Ante Pavelic was a victim of communism and deserves to be in that memorial.
Yeah, brick by brick. So there's actually quite a good book written by an Australian journalist called War Criminals Welcome, and it's just about the very long history of Australia just opening the door to a lot of these sort of Europe's greatest psychos. It would actually be interesting to do a pound for pound between Australia and Canada.
I was literally just thinking that we should have a starting 11 versus starting 11 and see who'd win,
Yeah, we really should do that. I mean, look, and even Sipo could probably join us because I'm sure that quite a few of those fellows wound up in apartheid South Africa as well.
Yeah, I mean, we have to point out that we can't use South Africa here because apartheid is that's just cheating at that point. If we're gonna include apartheid, that's just cheating.
Canada it's picking Messi and Ronaldo.
Exactly, it's like Man City. It's there's too much financial doping there. You can't do that.
Yeah, they're juiced up. I seriously think that we should actually do this at some point. But yeah, so Mark Ahrens in his book traces the first mass killer from Europe landing in Australia in 1947. So they were obviously, pretty promptly packing up the suitcases and burning the paperwork and getting straight on the boat. Australia obviously took in, and rightly so, a ton of European refugees after the war. And so, there just wasn't the paperwork to properly always assess people. But pretty early on, and as we'll see, from the behaviour and just the the pretty overt guys just, saying, hey, I'm Australian now, but, we're still gonna celebrate a lot of stuff from the old land that you guys might find a little bit weird. So yeah, Australia took in some of the maximum psychos that you kind of mentioned from some of the worst regimes in Europe. So Laszlo Megay, who was a Hungarian guy, he set up a Hungarian ghetto of I think 18,000 people. He personally took part in the torture of some people himself, and then was almost sort of hand marching them onto trains to Auschwitz. Then there was Constantine Untaru, who was a bagman for the Romanian Iron Guard. As you mentioned as well, probably the only group that could really rival the Ustaše when it came to sheer bloodlust. So there's this remarkable story that came from an American reporter, was it Mark White? I can't remember his name, of just how horrible the Iron Guard were. They rounded up a group of Jews and they made them, put all their furniture and papers and things out in the street and set fire to it. And they made them dance around it for I think a couple of days until they collapsed with exhaustion. And then they just kicked the shit out of them and set them all on fire as well. So yeah, just not sending the best people.
It's look, I'm not saying that I understand killing people, I don't, but when you want to kill people, I imagine that just shoot them, find them and shoot them, right? I don't know, maybe I lack imagination, but the whole dance around until they collapse of exhaustion, that's the sort of fucked upness that is just another level. You know what I mean? Just kill them. If you want to kill them, just kill them. Why do the whole fucking dance? What are we doing here? Why are you? It's just the spectacle of it is what makes me insane, aside from the actual killing, which is also makes me insane, but it's just, what the fuck?
Yeah, well, I mean, you've passed the test. You don't have the sadistic gene. But yeah, I think we've already started planning our perfect murder riot we were talking about in an earlier episode. So yeah, that's probably not how I'd do it, but I guess they, thought that they were going to rule for forever, or alternatively have a nice foreign country take you in and let you get the band back together in a new country.
Yeah, I mean, a sentence like being sent out to Australia is deserving for these people. To live in Australia is a fate worse than death, some people say.
So yeah, probably the most famous colonial era novel was called For the Term of His Natural Life, and it was just about people getting sent out to Australia and just how miserable it was. So a different term of their natural life, I suppose. So yeah, the two blokes that I mentioned, Megay and Untaru, they both helped to set up what was called the Migrant Advisory Council. So just a classically Australian bureaucratic name, which was an anti-communist Eastern European diaspora organisation, which had really deep ties to the Conservative Party in Australia, which is confusingly called the Liberal Party.
I've always found that confusing. So you don't have a party called the Conservative Party, do you?
No, look, it's too boring to go into, but it was really they were always fairly conservative. It was just a liberal as in liberal economics.
Yes, and then you have Labour, right?
As opposed to Labour, yeah. But they're slowly kind of morphing into now, one of the states has merged with the National Party, which is used to be called the Country Party. So it's just the farmers and stuff like that. Yeah. And they're called the Liberal National Party. So I think eventually they'll probably do a full rebrand.
One of my rules of thumb for broadly speaking, Europe, North America, and Australia, I guess in this situation, is that any party that counts among its supporters farmers is for me already that's a red flag. Khalas, I'm not listening to you, because if there's one group of people that is like psychotically reactionary across Europe and North America, it's farmers, like agriculturalists specifically.
Absolutely. There's a great story. So before they were called the National Party, they used to be called the Country Party. And in Australian Parliament, someone just there was Australian Parliament's quite famous for being, a bit of a bear pit and a lot of yelling and
You guys have the same tradition as the British, don't you? Like the theater.
Yeah. There was one Prime Minister, Paul Keating, who was like just a world-class sledger and just used to stand up and just sort of humiliate people in Parliament with names and things like that. It was a fun time. But there was one time when the National Party in its previous iteration, the Country Party, someone stood up in Parliament and said, "Oh, he's a country member," and someone else just stood up and said, "We remember."
Right.
Since then, cunt has become a term of endearment in Australian language.
Australians are a fascinating subspecies.
I know, actually, yeah. Peer behind the curtain. I know that Arma's become like deeply fascinated with Australian culture ever since they once referred to abortion as Borto.
Why do you do this? Why? What is wrong with you people? We need to go there. Something needs to be done about this country. Something needs to be done. I'm just saying, we need to do something about this.
We're a simple people, and and as this story shows, we let in all sorts. Well, we used to.
Yeah. Well, no wonder your ability to say words is so fucked up with all these criminals running around.
Yeah, maybe it was once we let the Hungarians in. It's like, that's right, we've got to go monosyllabic from now on. Those Hungarian names are just...
Don't scare them with too many words, too many vowels. They get scared, The humble village yokels of like the Magyars they're too terrified by words.
Anyway, we digress, which is like the tagline for this podcast. But so they formed the Migrant Advisory Council and have really deep ties with the Conservative Liberal Party, and they also formed what's called the Liberal Ethnic Council, which kind of became more ingrained with the party. And basically what they did was branch stacking, which is like sort of how you rig like what we call pre-selections, what Americans would call primaries. So, you can, to elect who's going to compete for the party at like at a regional level or municipal level, you just go around in your local community and get, every Hungarian grandma or whatever signed up to the party for this particular candidate, and so you can control large swathes of the party. And sort of ethnic enclaves ethnic minority groups are pretty good at doing that because they're just much more like tightly connected and often would sort of all live in one particular electorate. So the Liberal Ethnic Council was a faction within the Liberal Party, and they were known colloquially as the Uglies. And after the first two guys who I mentioned had sort of set this whole thing up, it then got taken over by a Slovenian wartime Nazi propagandist called Likenko Urbaničić, which I've obviously butchered, who was better known during the Ustaše regime as Ljubljana's Little Goebbels.
That sounds like one of those nicknames that like he would wear with pride if until he wouldn't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I mean, like, these guys were walking around. ASIO, Australia's kind of security services knew about them. Like I said, they were just front and center in parts of the major party that really had ran most of the federal Australian governments, for decades after the war. And they, no one really felt any shame about this.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this before and I'll say this again. The Nazis may have lost the battle, but they've won, or they've lost the war but won the peace, essentially. Like, considering how many of them found their way into, like, various apparatus of, like, various Western countries, like everything from Gladio to Reinhard Galen's organization to all of that. Like, they won the fucking peace. Like, what are we doing here? Like, they've done it. They just didn't, like, the top guys may have lost, your Görings, your Himmlers, but the guys who were, like, also just as responsible, but their names were slightly less, they won. They ended up doing everything they wanted to do, essentially.
Yeah, I love that expression, winning the peace. That's a really good way of describing it.
Yeah.
These migrant groups with ties to the Conservative Party, they formed really strong links with far-right international organisations, particularly in the beginning with the World Anti-Communist League, and then in time the League of Rights, which is more like the Commonwealth version that was like super interested not only in anti-communist and anti-Semitic stuff, but increasingly, particularly in the 70s and 80s, in like pro-Rhodesia, pro-apartheid stuff in Southern Africa. And I mean, just to illustrate like the power of the Ustaše groups in Australia, there were about 20 bombings on Australian soil with groups connected to the Ustaše, both still in the motherland and in Australia, in the 1960s and early 1970s. And most of the bombings were against people in the Serbian diaspora, or just also by opponents within the Croatian diaspora. Obviously not everyone that jumped over after World War II were signed up fascists. There were plenty of people in the community that really hated them. And, obviously like some of these guys, some of their families and stuff were probably personally persecuted by some of these guys. And then there was eventually a blast in George Street, which is like the main street in the Sydney CBD, that injured 16 people. And that was when the Australian government kind of stepped in, because it's like, it's not just these Croats blowing up each other now. They're, blowing up,
real
inverted
people.
Commas, real Australians. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that led to a bit of a crackdown and, some serious questions being asked about the Australian security services, who'd kind of, like all security services do, it's kind of like, let's just let these guys cook and see what they're up to.
Yeah, and as we know, there's never any blowback with that.
Never.
Famously.
Never. And so a lot of the descendants of these guys are still pretty active in Liberal Party branch stacking, as I mentioned. Also in the last couple of decades, really hardened like anti-gay politics kind of guys. And one of their favorite things to do is they keep getting like idiot skips. So like skips is like the derogatory term for white Australians, like as in Skippy, the bush kangaroo.
I thought it was bogan.
No, bogan's like chavs or rednecks.
Like, okay.
A skip is just like a general kind of like, name for white.
Okay. So if I do call someone a skip, would I get beaten up?
No, because I know like particularly there's a huge like Lebanese and Arab diaspora in Sydney now over the last couple of decades. Yeah, and they all use skip all the time. So.
Okay, good. I'm just learning. I'm learning a lot about Australia today. This is good.
Yeah.
So, also, I'm surprised that you guys still have like anti-gay as a thing, because like in Canada, like it's just been so resolved that like in the extremes where it is like a thing, like everyone feels the need to disavow it, even like conservatives broadly speaking. Our thing is anti-trans now. Like that's the big thing, but like gay really has been sort of or more or less agreed as like we're not touching that anymore. That's no longer our deal.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say it's broadly that as well in Australia. I mean, people do love to, just sort of bring it up for a bit of fun every now and then. And I think, there was a gay marriage referendum about 6 years ago, maybe in Australia. There was very comprehensively yes. But what people were able to do, like just conservative, skips in Australia, they sort of laundered a lot of anti-gay marriage stuff through migrant communities, and would just be like, well, like, are you saying that all these people in like the Lebanese diaspora and the Croatian diaspora and that, are you saying that they're just all, unrepentant homophobes?
Well, that's funny. They do that the same here with trans, anti-trans stuff. Also very, very supremely funny to me, because the stereotype for Lebanese among other Arabs is that they're all gay, all their men are gay.
Exactly, yeah. But yeah, just all effete, like Beiroutians,
cosmopolitans, yeah.
Yeah, sitting on the beachfront and speaking French. But yeah, so sorry, back to their sort of role in the Liberal Party. I mean, they're just sort of left to do their branch stacking and their, anti-gay, trans stuff, whatever. But what they love doing is just getting these moron, like, they sort of start low level, but they have gotten some pretty big scalps. like white conservative politicians and like get them out and say like, oh, will you come and speak at this like, you know, Croatian day? And it's always like I think it's normally the celebration of the Axis powers invading Yugoslavia in like World War II, or Ante Pavlich's birthday, and then they get them like posing in front of the Ustaše flag.
Oh god.
And yeah, like they get scalps all the time. And it must be like a bit of a source of pleasure. I mean, as we'll kind of see, some of these people that are like still real hardened, like Ustaše guys, are obviously pretty serious kind of dudes, I suppose, in their commitment to the cause after how many, 80 years on. But yeah, a big part of me wonders if they just kind of enjoy getting scalps like this.
Probably. It's like that bit of like the headline that's like, Japanese guy fights 35 years after the war's end, or whatever, that's the whole thing, yeah.
yeah, I think it is a bit like that.
Yeah, except instead of like an island in the Pacific, it's like the suburbs of Sydney.
Yeah. So anyway, with all of that political background, now we get onto the really important thing, which is soccer, which is what we call football in Australia. If people in more normal countries get offended, sorry, but there's like 4 football codes in Australia. So we call...
Yeah, you guys have Australian football, which is an unacceptable, heretic sort of activity. Which I never really got. I once watched it on TV in a hotel on a layover that I was in a layover in London, and it was just on the TV for some reason, and I just could not grasp it. Like, it just made no sense to me. But anyways, continue.
So soccer obviously came to Australia with British migrants at, you know, sort of the late 19th century, but it never really took off until all the Europeans arrived after World War II. And so I guess just to illustrate how much of like the migrant game it was, there was a really pioneering figure in Australian soccer called Johnny Warren, who was a football player and then became like a commentator and was really involved in the like organizational structure of Australian football. And I think as like one of the few skips involved with it, he was quite a pivotal figure, I guess, in trying to make the sport more mainstream. But he wrote an autobiography called Sheila's, Wogs and Poofters, which was like the names that people always called like people that were into soccer.
Are we allowed to say that?
I don't know. But I mean, it was the title of a book that was put out. So Sheila's obviously is like Australian slang for woman. Wog means like people like normally from like Italy and Greece. And again, that's sort of been reclaimed. It's like queer. It's been like reclaimed by the community. So I feel like I can say it. And then poofters, which is like the horrible word for gay. But yeah, that was basically like the general like white Australian attitude towards soccer for most of the 20th century. And so obviously like the waves
like
of
87% of Australia's GDP is inventing new slurs. Like just people working in factories just inventing slurs. 'Cause like these words are bizarre to me. I've never heard of wog and poofter.
I'm just going to clip that up of you saying it in that way. It's wonderful.
Yeah, that's going to haunt me when I run for office. Yeah, that's for sure.
So yeah, obviously in the like 50s and 60s, a lot of the migrants to Australia were like Eastern and Southern Europeans. In the 70s and 80s, there was like another real wave from Yugoslavia and the Middle East. Now like Australia has like most of the good Australian players in Europe are African kids, like South Sudanese and things like that. Who a lot of them came over the last couple of decades. But back in the post-World War II era, clubs basically just became like diaspora clubs, like just completely identifying with, you know, so there was like an Italian team, Croatian teams, Greek team, Macedonian, Jewish, etc.
Yeah, didn't Ange play for and or coach like the local Greek affiliate?
Yeah, so it was called, at one point it was like Melbourne Hellas, and then it became, as they like tried to kind of de-ethnicize it, I think it became South Melbourne, and that was, Ange Postecoglou played for them, and they were coached at one point by Puskás.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he came out, and I think it was kind of like, yeah, he wasn't in, I don't know if he was a great coach, and he wasn't in his, you know, kind of, maybe wasn't in his prime anymore, but he, weirdly, like one of the, you know, legendary European players came out and, just randomly coached this Australian team. And he
Pushkas
didn't
goes
even
to Australia. But Elle, we already discussed Hungarian war criminals fleeing to your country. Wait, let's go.
Let's go. But yeah, and then obviously, lots more people from the Balkans just kept coming over, especially after Tito died in 1980, when it just, the kind of tinderbox that was the Balkans and Yugoslavia was getting ready to pop again, which it obviously did with the civil war that began in 1991. And we're just not going to go into all of that because that's about 10,000 episodes. And yeah, obviously just once again, just to emphasize that, not saying that all of the Croats that came to Australia were fascist. For example, there was actually one football team and in Perth, I believe, that was like a communist Yugoslav team, and they had a framed portrait of Tito at the soccer club.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but just all I can think of is Rangers having the King's portrait in their locker room. Is this like the communist version of that?
I guess, yeah.
It's so bizarre. I'm sorry, I love Tito, but it's bizarre having a portrait of a guy in your locker room.
Yeah, well, not in the locker, like in the clubhouse, so where you go drink afterwards.
Oh, fair.
So yeah, you have to remember that, especially at this time in Australia, every single thing that was done, whether it was, work, sport, politics, just ended in sort of people all going to one place afterwards, drinking a shit ton of beer, and then, getting into some sort of fight or disgracing themselves in some incredible way.
This is what woke took away from us. All this modern day nutrition and football, all of this fitness. We need our players to get drunk and beat the crap out of each other.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, the great thing was about the Balkan soccer in Australia in the 70s and 80s was that the crowds just got started doing it, beforehand. So it was my overarching memory of soccer growing up in Australia. It was only ever on the news when basically a game had to be abandoned because there was so much violence in the stands. And it happened a lot. So, basically from 70s, 80s, 90s, and even even it still happens today, a couple of teams would play each other, especially if they were Croat and Serb teams. And I mean, they'd be lucky if the games would last 20 or 30 minutes because the crowd would just start with the flares.
I wonder if there's a betting market on that. If you bet on how long the game can go on before it gets called off.
Just some of the brawls and... there were running street battles, there were gunfights, there were, stabbings, there were just absolutely wild. So in one famous incident in 1972, a Jewish team called Melbourne Hakoah played Melbourne, Croatia. And, as we've kind of discussed already, there were a lot of fairly... guys with fascist sympathies in in a lot of these Croatian groups, and there was a really horrendous tackle, and the referee warned the Croatia player that they'd be sent off if they did something like that again, and sort of pointed to the dressing room, and the Croatian supporting crowd misinterpreted that and thought he had been sent off, and invaded the pitch and just beat the shit out of the officials.
Charming.
Yeah, and so Melbourne, Croatia wound up being kicked out of the league. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. They were still denied. And, people were saying, the Croatians were set up because it was a match between, and I quote, Nazi sympathizers and Jews.
Well, that's certainly a legal defense, I'm sure, yeah.
Okay, so in 1977, the National Soccer League was formed. And once again... people had the bright idea of saying, let's just base it around these ethnic identities. Although with one important stipulation, no Croatians. And so they just wouldn't let the Croatian clubs in the league until 1984, when they let Sydney, Croatia and Melbourne, Croatia in, which is just pretty funny because they were obviously trying to even then sort of clamp down a bit on it. And then it's okay, yeah, we'll let the Croatians in and just let them call themselves Sydney, Croatia and Melbourne, Croatia.
I mean, at least it's not Sydney Ustaše and Perth
Pavlich's
or whatever.
boys. Yeah, that is true. So yeah, there was another kind of really infamous incident in the 90s between Melbourne, Croatia and a Greek team, which was actually the Ange Postecoglou's old team that we mentioned earlier. And I found this very amusing. Afterwards, the Croatian supporters started flying Macedonian flags and the Greeks started flying Serbian flags.
I do love it when, like, instead of just flying their own flags, they find what would piss off the enemy more. Like, you know, it's not just that, like, we're for something, it's that we're against you and we're against everything you, like, support. So, like, yeah, of course they'll fly Macedonian flags. It reminds me of, like, Rangers flying Israeli flags just to piss off Celtic.
Yeah. It's I love that. It's not like pettiness, I guess. It's just that the hatred of that just like goes so deep. And it's like, you know, they didn't have Amazon back then. Like, where the hell do you get, like, a Macedonian flag from?
Going to the shop and being like, I need you to sew me, like, 10 of these. You understand? I need them by next week. The derby's happening.
So yeah, that was another event that just ended, you know, in rock throwing and running street battles between all the supporters and naturally mass arrests. And I'm sure, you know, Australian cops, particularly in the 70s and 80s, were like so insanely corrupt and violent. And I'm sure that they just would have loved getting, you know, arresting like, yeah, just a big group of Macedonians or whatever and just giving them a, you know, getting out the billy clubs and having a bit of free-for-all as well.
What were the Australian cops like in terms of ethnicity? Were they like, you know how like in America you had like Italians and Irish becoming cops and so on in different cities? Was that a thing over there? Or?
Ooh, I don't think it was. I mean, it would have been because there were issues like in some parts of the country with like Catholics and Protestants in Australia until like the 50s.
Yeah.
And there was, the kind of like some sort of informal segregation. So it probably was regional, I would guess, or like.
But they wouldn't be like Croatian cops or anything.
I mean, there probably were a few, but probably not a lot. Like they would definitely would have been Anglos for sure.
Ah, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, so a lot of these soccer clubhouses as well were sort of doubling often as political offices with these like people in the Conservative Party that were doing the branch sacking. As I mentioned, they were very, you know, love nothing more than getting an idiot local senator in or something to pose with their Ustaše flag. As I mentioned earlier, like the Australian media back then was obviously, you know, really not averse to xenophobia. So it was always beating up whenever there was like an incident between soccer clubs, you know, with migrant identities, they were always making it into this huge thing. So in 1988, the Australian Soccer Federation commissioned what was known as the Bradley Report, which recommended that the governing body like de-ethnicize Australian soccer and just create new like artificial soccer clubs that just got rid of those identities.
Yeah, well, I'm sure that's an easy thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, like, it was really controversial, and there were, you know, some 1988 Australia was not a hotbed of wokeism, and some of the things that, you know, people and you know, politicians and police and stuff who were interviewed for the report process said were, just like pretty downright xenophobic. And so, I mean, one of the things in the 90s that Soccer Australia tried to do was release what was known as a national merchandising plan. And they wanted to get like kids wearing, you know, a jersey for like Sydney FC or whatever instead of Manchester United. But then the problem was obviously that so many of the clubs were ethnically based. So a lot of them just had like a lot of the Croatian clubs just straight up had their like logo as the Croatian flag or the Italian flag or whatever. And so they literally called like what we're trying to do is like Australianize the game, which kind of just led to like it was all pretty xenophobic. But it also led to my favourite quote from this whole affair, which was the head of Australian soccer at the time saying, "It's pretty difficult to market Croatian nationalism to non-Croatians."
That's awesome. Well done. I just wanted to say that as far as the plan to get kids to wear Sydney jerseys instead of Manchester United, I completely agree that Croatian nationalism is a good replacement for an evil terrorist organization like Manchester United. Like kids should wear Ustaše shirts instead of Manchester United.
Yeah, well, I mean, if we're talking about, you know, far-right destructive fascism in the 90s, I mean, you'd take Manchester United in that battle over the Croatians, right? I mean, they were far more... Sir Alex Ferguson was a far greater international far right figure than Ante Pavlich by that time.
Absolutely. I mean, he should have been sent to the Hague. He should still be sent to the Hague.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Around this time, Mark Bosnich.
Speaking of Manchester United.
Who was a Manchester United goalkeeper for a long time. And by then had joined Aston Villa. He's, Croatian diaspora as well. And I mean, probably one of Australia's most successful soccer players. Also one of cocaine's most successful patrons. which might explain
how can you accuse him of being racist when he supported the economy of Colombia for several years?
He's playing a game for Aston Villa, and they were playing against Tottenham, which is a traditionally Jewish club in London, and he just straight out on the pitch did the Nazi salute. I think he even did the little moustache, which to me, when you don't just do the arm, when you do the moustache as well, that's just a different level of Nazi salute.
Yeah, you're not a fan. It's a difference between being a fan of Nazism and being a fan of Hitler, like Hitler. You know what I mean? I respect it less because I'm like, you're a fan of one person instead of the club. I'm bandwagoning. You can't do that.
Yeah. It's people that follow Cristiano Ronaldo or LeBron James from team to team.
Yeah, exactly. You need to support the club, not the player. Nazism is bigger than Hitler. We have to respect, the club.
You get, what is it? You play for the name on the front of the shirt, and people will remember the name on the back.
Yeah, play for the swastika on the front, not the Hitler on the back. I didn't know this about Mark Bosnich, by the way. I didn't know about the Hitler salute or whatever it was. That's hilarious.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I have a feeling. I'm pretty sure this was in the cocaine era. It could just be cocaine as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was just kind of confirmed a lot of suspicions that people had about Croatian soccer in Australia. And anyway, this all basically just led to the head of Soccer Australia just coming out outright and just saying we have a problem with ethnic clubs, and in particular with the Croatian clubs. And then he said the league would be better off without them.
Is he wrong? I don't think so.
Yeah, I mean, look, needless to say, this didn't go down terribly well, and there's been a fair bit of there's been a fair bit of historical writing about this stuff, and people are saying, they're cosmopolitanizing the game in Australia and taking it away from its roots, and there's migrant working class kind of roots, which is all fair. But obviously they were, just hotbeds for violence and organized crime and just, keeping some, in the case of some of the Croatian clubs, obviously if you're celebrating the Ustaše regime, that's just pretty fucking awful, and you should not do that. This all led to the formation of the A-League in the mid-2000s. And that was just entirely to de-ethnicize it, and especially to defang Melbourne, Croatia and Sydney, Croatia, which once again were just just constantly getting up to shit. And in time, this was, I mean, you kind of made the comparison before, but a lot of people said, this is, exactly what they did in Scotland by discriminating against the Irish Catholic teams.
Yeah, this is exactly like the colonialism of Ireland. This is identical to the 800 years of occupation in Ireland.
I mean, yeah, I guess, anti-Catholic bigotry, it can strike anywhere.
Yeah. The Reformation is happening in the suburbs of Melbourne. Hessian troops are crossing in as we speak.
Yeah, crossing the Yarra River.
Yeah.
So and I guess it kind of confirmed for a lot of people that they had done the right thing, because Australia qualified for the World Cup in 2006 for the first time in 32 years, defeating Uruguay in this penalty shootout in Sydney.
Uruguay is a Catholic majority country. Very interesting that you guys knocked them out. Very interesting.
Yeah, the papal bull came down, and the Uruguayans, they couldn't say no to Rome.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it was such a big deal in Australian soccer at the time that when the final penalty went in from John Aloisi, some of the commentators were just all yelling out it was for Johnny Warren, who's the guy who I mentioned earlier who wrote Sheila's Wogs and Poofters. and who died like a year before they qualified.
I'm sorry, I can't get over the time. Sorry, I can't.
I will not be putting that as the podcast title.
Please do. Listen, look, I don't know if I'm allowed to say these 3 words, but I want to say them just once because I want to feel how they sound, okay? Sheilas, wogs, and pooftas. Pooftas, keeping in mind that with an A at the end, it's not ER, it's not poofters, it's pooftas. Fascinating people, the Australians.
Yeah, you've kind of got the the inflection a little bit wrong. So everything in Australian, like with the accent, you just assume that it ends in AH. Okay. So it's like soccer, poofta.
So Sheilas, wogs, pooftas.
Oh my god! Like I said, if more than 2 people ever listen to this, it's getting clipped up and we're out. But I feel like it's a book title, so we're allowed to say it. I've given you the pass.
Yeah, I have an Australian friend. I'm not racist. I have an Australian friend.
I've given you the SWP pass.
Okay, and also the Bogan pass. Elle has given me the Bogan pass. I can accuse you of being Bogan.
Ooh, yeah. See, I'm not exactly Bogan, but I come from Cronulla, which is its own thing. So I can hand out those passes. And so so basically, like Australian soccer is, kind of they like to say, and that's the end of the story, and everything's really lovely. But of course, they might have kind of defanged all of these like heavily ethnicized clubs. But, like, there's still tremendous amounts of violence continuing, which to me is pretty wild that people are still going into bat for Ante Pavlic in, the year 2025. So in a couple of years ago, in 2022, there was a final of like a slightly lower level competition of a Sydney Croatian team where the Croatian supporters did fascist chants and salutes, and they even started booing and waving Ustaše flags when an Indigenous person did a welcome to country before the game.
Oh my god.
Yeah. Yeah. And last year there was like a massive brawl in Western Australia between a Croatian and a Serbian club, where fans were smashing glass bottles over each other's heads. And there's this like incredible video online, I'll post a link of it, of where the Croatian team club president is just on the sideline hurling abuse at the Serbian players throughout the match and just being like, I'll fucking come and get you afterwards. And it was just, it's quite remarkable.
The lesson of this episode, as far as I'm aware, is that NATO should intervene and bomb Sydney. Sydney is the new Belgrade. We need to send in F-16s to liberate the oppressed Serbs from the wretched Croats.
Someone looked at it a few years ago and still a ton of the Croatian football clubs are displaying busts of Ante Pavlic, and even a lot of these community groups who still organise within the soccer clubs and then the Conservative Party. In 2014, the first Croatian Prime Minister to ever visit Australia came down, and all these Croatian soccer and conservative groups just completely shunned him because he'd implemented back home anti-fascist policies, like making the chant that the soccer fans used that I mentioned before, during the welcome to country. He made that illegal in Croatia, but Croatian diaspora was still doing it in Australia.
I was talking to a Croat friend of mine about this, actually, and he was like, yeah, all these people don't realize how, utterly loathed they are by, the people that still live in Croatia, just because, they're trying to religitate something that the people who actually lived through the war want to get over, people who actually live in, Croats who live in Croatia, just want to get over this. They're not interested in, religitating the 90s all over again. It's only the diaspora, I feel, that have this desire to assert their identity by, going back to, historical grievances.
Yeah, it's like Bostonians still really getting into the IRA in the 2000s or whatever, after everyone's just just shut the fuck up, we've got some peace, let us just live.
Yeah.
And as for politics, I mean, figures in the Liberal Party just keep glorifying the Ustaše by accident. They just keep turning up and giving speeches and posing for flags at these April 10 ceremonies. And while they're kind of generally down probably with a lot of the sentiments. It's just that they're just like completely fucking ignorant skip morons who just don't understand Croatian politics at all.
I wish I was an Australian politician because I would show up to these things wearing a fez and just looking at them and being like, "You are a strong boy. You will join the army now. We'll make you janissaries."
Yeah. Or just turn up with like, I don't know what the kind of Serbian version of like a Pavlich bust or like a
Presumably a
Ustaše flag
Chetnik flag or a Chetnik logo.
Yeah, something like that. And yeah, that's the thing, that all these morons who turn up to this stuff just like wouldn't even understand what it is. But yeah, I mean that's one thing they what do people always say, that you've got to assimilate, right?
Yeah.
And the Croatians have actually like done that really well in just the way that a lot of these like far right immigrants have just like completely assimilated into Australian conservative politics. To the point where, as I mentioned, they were, just really, really involved in a lot of the anti-gay stuff until the tide had just kind of turned completely. But certainly were a place for a lot of people who wanted to seem respectable to just kind of launder like just outright homophobia.
Yeah, that's the way it goes. I mean, we have those here as well, the victims of communism people. And so on. It's just wretched, man. They want the peace. I keep telling you this. Like, it's depressing how many of them are around and how and it's not just them. I mean, obviously the people who actually survived the war are dead. It's just their kids and grandkids, and they all get inculcated into the same ideology. Like fucking Chrystia Freeland, like she never fought in World War II, but she's just like, I'm proud of my granddad or whatever. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Is he? Because most of the big diaspora in Canada is Ukrainian,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
and like far right kind of Ukrainians. Yeah, was her grandfather who was like the
editor of a newspaper for the Nazis in Warsaw or Krakow or one of those places.
Yeah, it's so grim, but yeah. Well, I think I'll definitely do a bit more on it, especially closer to the time when my book on the Moonies is coming out, because the world, like the global anti-communist movement is, I'm very much in the camp that was World War III. We've already seen it, and that we still have remnants and pockets of it going on now.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, that was another fun trip around the world, and hopefully I haven't horrified too many people with all my Australianisms.
No, that was fun. The right to boros should be protected as well. Boros, right? Bortos? Bortos.
Borto.
Yeah.
You say Bordeaux.
Yeah. And popping down to the local for a Borto. Yeah.
Oh god, this is horrific. But thanks for joining us for another episode, and we'll see you all next week.
Yeah, see you next week, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to Hell to Pay. Please subscribe, like, share, tell your friends, and stay tuned for more.